Aaron returned to his hometown after many years away. He had left as a young boy and now came back as an adult with a calm face, a quiet nature, and a desire to start his life in a simple way. He rented a small room near the market and began working in a repair shop, hoping to save money and settle down slowly. He had never been interested in the land his parents once owned. In his mind, it was an empty stretch of dirt and bushes, something without value. His parents never spoke much about it, and after their passing, his uncle raised him with limited information about anything from the past. One warm afternoon, he went to the town office to update a few documents for his work. He stood in line patiently, holding a folder of old papers. When his turn came, he handed everything to the officer. The officer checked each document one by one, typed something on his computer, then suddenly stopped. The officer looked at Aaron with surprise and asked if he knew that he still owned a very large piece of land outside town. Aaron thought he misheard and asked for confirmation. The officer pointed to the screen and said that the record was clear. The land was still under his name, and no transfer had ever taken place. Aaron felt confused. He asked for the map to see the exact location. The officer pulled out a file and placed a printed map in front of him. Aaron stared at it with disbelief. The land was much larger than he imagined. It stretched from the old river curve all the way to the base of the hill that guarded the valley. It was not a small field but a wide area with long boundaries. Aaron tried to recall if his parents had ever spoken about its size, but nothing came to mind. It felt strange, almost unreal. Yet the documents were official and stamped. After leaving the office, he felt a mixture of curiosity and worry. He walked toward the edge of town, following the old paths that led to the hills. The sun was high, and the silence of the open land felt peaceful. Aaron walked for nearly an hour, passing tall grass, scattered rocks, and distant trees. When he reached the area marked on the map, he slowed down. He expected empty ground, maybe the ruins of a small shed. But instead, he saw something that made him stop in shock. A huge mansion stood on the land. It was large and bright under the sun. Tall white pillars supported a balcony that wrapped around the second floor. Wide stone steps led to a large front door. The windows were tall and clean, reflecting the sky like mirrors. A long driveway curved from the main gate to the front porch. A security booth stood near the entrance with a guard inside. The entire place looked like it belonged to someone rich and powerful. Aaron could not believe what he was seeing. There was no mistake. This was the exact land marked on the map. He walked closer, feeling a strange mix of confusion and rising anger. As he approached the gate, he saw a sign on the wall. It carried the name of the HOA president, a man known across town for his strict rules and commanding presence. People often whispered about his influence. He controlled building approvals, neighborhood rules, and even some local events. Many feared him, many respected him, and almost everyone avoided arguing with him. Aaron stood outside the gate, staring at the mansion that had been built on land that belonged to him. He wanted answers. He wanted an explanation for how such a large structure could appear on his property without him knowing. He walked up to the guard booth and greeted the guard politely. The guard stepped out and asked what he wanted in a firm voice. Aaron explained that he was the owner of the land and wished to speak to the HOA president. The guard frowned as if he heard a joke. He shook his head and said that the land had belonged to the president for a long time. He added that the mansion was protected and only invited guests were allowed through the gate. Aaron tried to explain again, but the guard raised his hand and told him to leave. He warned Aaron that the president did not like strangers causing trouble. Aaron felt his heart burn with frustration. He stepped away but kept staring at the mansion, unable to accept what he saw. That evening he went back to his rented room and opened the old box of papers his uncle had given him years ago. Inside were birth certificates, a few photographs, and a large envelope sealed long ago. He tore the seal carefully. Inside he found the original land papers. They were clear, stamped, and signed. Every detail matched the records from the town office. The land was his, fully and legally. No sale, no transfer, no agreement existed that gave it to anyone else. The truth settled in his heart like a heavy stone. Someone had taken his land, someone had built a grand home on it, and that someone was the most powerful person in town. The next morning Aaron went to the HOA office. The building was modern and clean, with glass walls and white pillars. Inside, the receptionist looked at him with a cold expression and asked if he had an appointment. Aaron explained that he did not have one but needed to speak to the president. The receptionist asked him to wait and then made a call. After nearly half an hour, the door of a large office opened, and the president walked out. He was a tall man with short hair and a firm posture. His eyes were sharp and carried the kind of confidence that came from authority. He walked toward Aaron and asked what the issue was. Aaron explained everything calmly. He told him about the land papers, the records, and the mansion built on his property. The president listened with a faint smile, his hands clasped behind his back. When Aaron finished speaking, the president said that the land had been empty for years and no owner had been present. He claimed that he had taken the responsibility to improve it and use it for the good of the community. He acted as if he had done Aaron a favor. He also hinted that the town respected him, and it would be unwise to challenge him. His voice carried a quiet threat hidden behind polite words. Aaron felt anger rise inside him, but he stayed quiet. He thanked the president for his time and walked out of the building. Outside, he stopped and looked up at the sky. The sun was bright, but his thoughts were dark. He knew he had been wronged. The land was his. The mansion was on his property without permission. The president had no right to threaten him or claim it. Aaron stood there for a long moment and breathed slowly. He made a choice. A firm, steady choice. He decided to fight for what was his. He would reclaim the land. He would face the president. He would go to court if needed, and he would not stop until the truth was recognized. The path ahead was uncertain and filled with challenges, but Aaron felt something powerful inside him. It was the strength of someone who had been silent for too long and now refused to be ignored. His story was only beginning. Aaron woke up early the next morning with a heavy but determined heart. The memory of the mansion standing proudly on his land stayed in his mind, like a sharp picture that refused to fade. He knew that the fight ahead would not be easy, yet he could not turn away now. Everything inside him told him that he must stand up for what was right. He did not have money or power, but he had truth on his side. He walked to the town library because he wanted to understand the laws connected to land ownership. The library was quiet, with tall shelves and a gentle smell of old paper. Aaron sat at one of the large wooden tables and opened different books about land rights and property laws. He took notes slowly, reading every detail carefully. The more he read, the more his confidence grew. The law was simple. If the land was in his name and he never sold or transferred it, then no one had the right to build anything on it without his permission. Still, he understood that the HOA president was not someone who would give up his. In the past, people in town had spoken with mixed voices about the president. Some praised his leadership while others said he used his position to gain more control over the community. Aaron never paid attention to those stories before, but now each story felt important because this man had taken something precious from him. After a few hours of reading, Aaron stood up and stretched his tired arms. The librarian, an older man named Dallin, noticed him and asked if everything was all right. Aaron gave a small smile and explained a part of his situation without mentioning names. Dallin listened quietly and said that Aaron should keep every document safe and start gathering more proof. He advised Aaron to take pictures of the mansion, the land, the boundaries, and anything that showed that the construction had taken place without his knowledge. Aaron thanked him and left the library feeling more prepared. The next day Aaron walked back to the area where the mansion stood. He stayed at a distance, so the guards would not bother him again. He took photos of the outer walls, the gate, the driveway, and the land around it. While he worked, a few neighbors from nearby houses watched him. Some whispered among themselves, wondering who this young man was and why he was taking pictures. Aaron did not mind their curiosity. He continued to record every detail that could help him later. When he returned to the town center, he noticed a small law office near the main road. The sign said legal assistance available. Aaron hesitated at first because he did not know how much such help would cost, but he decided to walk it. Inside, a simple desk stood near the entrance, and a young assistant greeted him politely. Aaron explained that he needed advice about a land matter. After a few minutes, the assistant guided him to meet a lawyer named Rion. Rion was a quiet man with a calm face and steady eyes. He listened carefully, as Aaron described everything from the discovery of the land to the meeting with the HOA president. When Aaron finished, Rion nodded slowly and said he had handled similar cases before. He told Aaron that the strongest points in his favor were the original land papers and the official records from the town office. Those two details alone made his case strong, but Rion also warned him that the opponent had influence. The HOA president was wealthy and had many connections. He would try to delay the case or use pressure to discourage Aaron. Aaron listened without fear. He had expected these challenges. What mattered to him was that the law recognized the truth. After a long discussion, Rion agreed to take the case. He offered a reasonable payment plan because he felt Aaron was honest and sincere. Aaron left the office with a lighter heart. He finally had someone experienced on his side. He walked through the market with a renewed sense of hope. The people around him were busy buying vegetables, calling out prices, and greeting neighbors. Life moved normally for them, while his life was slowly changing in unexpected ways. Later that evening, Aaron sat at the small table in his room and reorganized his papers. He created a folder with photographs, copies of documents, and a list of events in order. He wrote everything clearly so that he would not forget important details. He worked late into the night. Though he felt tired, he also felt a sense of purpose he had not experienced before. A week later, Rion filed the case officially. The news spread quickly through the town because it involved the HOA president, a man who rarely faced opposition. Some people supported Aaron silently, admiring his courage. Others were doubtful or afraid to take sides. Some believed the president would win easily because of his influence. Aaron heard different opinions but stayed strong. He kept reminding himself that he was not fighting for fame or conflict. He was fighting for justice. One morning, while Aaron was buying fruit from a small stall, a woman approached him. She introduced herself as Myra and said she lived near the mansion. Her voice was gentle, and her eyes were full of concern. She told Erin that she had seen construction workers clearing the land years ago but had never seen any legal notice posted. Usually, when someone built a large structure, there was a board showing permissions and approvals. In this case, no such board ever appeared. This information was important. Erin thanked her sincerely. Mira said she was willing to testify if needed because she believed in fairness. Her support encouraged Erin greatly. Every small piece of truth made his case stronger. A few days later, the HOA president called for a public meeting. He stood on a raised platform and gave a speech about his contributions to the town. He spoke confidently, reminding the people of the improvements he had made, the roads he had repaired, and the security he had arranged. Toward the end, he mentioned Erin without using his name. He said that some people were trying to create trouble for personal gain, but he would not allow the peace of the community to be disturbed. Erin stood among the crowd, listening silently. The president's words did not shake him. Instead, they strengthened his belief that the president wanted to control the narrative. Erin knew his truth would speak louder in court. As the court date approached, Erin spent more time preparing. He visited the land again to confirm the boundaries. He also spoke with older residents who remembered his parents. One elderly man told him that his parents had bought the land legally many years ago and planned to grow trees there. The man even remembered seeing the original boundary stones before the mansion was built. His memory was clear and detailed, which added more support to Erin's case. On the night before the court hearing, Erin sat alone in his room. He breathed slowly, calming his nerves. He knew the courtroom would be a place of pressure, but he also knew that he had done everything he could to present the truth. He held the file containing the land documents and closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about his parents, wondering what they would say if they were still alive. He believed they would be proud of him for standing up for what was right. When the morning light finally arrived, Erin felt ready. He put on a clean shirt, gathered his documents, and headed to the courthouse with steady steps. He was not just a young man fighting a powerful opponent. He was the rightful owner of the land, and he was prepared to prove it. His journey had moved from confusion to discovery, then from anger to determination. Now he was stepping into the next stage of the battle, knowing that the truth would guide him, and this was only the beginning of what was to come. The morning of the court hearing arrived with a clear sky and a cool breeze. Erin walked toward the courthouse with slow but confident steps. His mind was steady, his heart firm, and his thoughts focused on the truth he carried with him. The courthouse was an old stone building with tall windows and wide wooden doors. People from the town gathered outside, some curious, some worried, and some simply eager to watch what would happen when a young man stood against a powerful leader. Erin saw lawyer Rian waiting for him near the entrance. Rian greeted him with a calm smile and asked if he was ready. Erin nodded. Together they walked inside, past the rows of benches, and toward the front where the judge would sit. The hall was large and quiet, with high ceilings that made every sound echo softly. A few minutes later, the HOA president entered with his own lawyer and several supporters. He walked with his usual confidence, his eyes cold and sure of victory. He glanced at Erin briefly, then looked away as if the case was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. But Erin did not let his confidence shake. He reminded himself that the papers were real, the boundaries were clear, and the mansion stood on his land without permission. When the judge entered the room, everyone stood. The judge was a serious-looking man known for fairness and careful attention to details. He sat down and asked both sides to begin. Rian stepped forward, carrying a neat folder of documents, and began to explain the situation from the start. He spoke slowly and clearly, presenting the land papers, the official records, and the photographs Erin had taken. The judge examined each document carefully. He asked questions, and Rian answered confidently. Erin watched quietly, feeling a mix of tension and hope. The judge then turned to the HOA president's lawyer and asked for their explanation. The president's lawyer said that the land was abandoned for many years and that no owner ever came forward. He claimed that the president invested time and money to improve the land for community benefit. He also said that the mansion stood as a symbol of progress, not wrongdoing. The lawyer spoke smoothly, trying to make the president appear noble. However, the judge asked for proof of permission or any legal agreement signed by Erin or his family. The president's lawyer paused for a moment. He then said that the president believed the land had no owner at the time of construction, and that the absence of objection meant silent approval. The judge raised an eyebrow. Clearly not satisfied, Rian stepped forward again and reminded the court that abandoning land did not remove ownership in the eyes of law. Ownership remained valid as long as it was never transferred or sold. The judge nodded. Erin felt a wave of relief inside him. Every point Rian made moved the case closer to the truth. Next, the judge allowed witnesses to speak. Myra, the woman who lived near the mansion, came forward. She described how construction began suddenly without any legal notice posted. She said she saw workers clearing the land early in the mornings and working late hours. Her voice was steady, and her honesty was clear. After her testimony, the elderly man who remembered Erin's parents stepped forward. He spoke about the old boundary stones and how he had seen the land remained untouched for many years until the mansion appeared. His words added more strength to Aaron's claim. The president listened quietly, though his expression stiffened little by little. He had expected resistance, but not this much detail. His supporters in the courtroom shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. After the witnesses spoke, the president's lawyer tried to challenge their statements, but their words were simple, clear, and consistent. The judge took notes, not missing a single detail. Finally, Aaron was called to speak. He stood up slowly, walked to the front, and took a breath. He explained everything from the beginning. He told the court how he discovered the truth, how he visited the land, how the guard refused to believe him, and how the president dismissed him. He spoke in simple words, but every word carried sincerity. He said he was not fighting for revenge or conflict but for what belonged to him. The hall was silent when he finished. Even those who doubted him felt the strength of his honesty. The judge thanked him and asked both sides if they had anything more to add. When no one spoke, the judge announced that he would review the evidence and deliver the decision soon. The court dismissed everyone for the day. Aaron stepped outside with Rianne, feeling tired but hopeful. Some townspeople came to him and offered quiet support. Mira wished him luck. The elderly man patted his shoulder and said he believed justice would prevail. The HOA president came out moments later, his face tight. He walked past Aaron without a word, but his eyes showed frustration. For the first time in years, someone had challenged him and stood firm. His influence could not silence the truth in court, and that frustrated him deeply. Days passed while the judge reviewed the case. Aaron continued working at the repair shop during the day and at night reorganized his documents again and again, making sure everything was in order. He tried to stay calm, but inside he felt the weight of waiting. Rianne visited him often to keep him updated. The lawyer was confident that the case was strong and that the truth was clear. One evening, a letter arrived from the courthouse. Aaron held it carefully, his fingers trembling slightly. He called Rianne to meet him before opening it. When Rianne arrived, they sat together at the small wooden table in Aaron's room. Aaron opened the envelope slowly and unfolded the letter. The letter stated that the judge had reviewed all evidence and set a date for the final decision. It would be announced in court for everyone to hear. Aaron breathed deeply and thanked Rianne for staying with him through every step. Rianne assured him that no matter the outcome, they had presented the truth strongly. Finally, the day of the final hearing arrived. The courthouse was more crowded than before. People whispered among themselves, wondering what the final decision would be. Some believed Aaron would win. Others believed the president's influence would protect him. But everyone knew that this case would affect the entire community. Aaron sat in the front row with Rianne. The president sat across the room, his face calm but his eyes sharp. When the judge entered, the hall fell silent. The judge took his seat, opened the file, and began reading his final statement. He spoke about the importance of property rights. He said that ownership could not be taken away simply because someone built on the land without permission. He talked about the responsibility of powerful individuals to follow the law like everyone else. He mentioned the strong evidence presented by Aaron, the witnesses, and the official records. Aaron listened with his heart pounding. Every word from the judge felt like a step closer to justice. The judge paused, looked around the room, and then announced the decision. He ruled that the land belonged legally and fully to Aaron. The entire hall reacted. Some gasped, some smiled, and some whispered loudly. Aaron felt his chest fill with relief, pride, and gratitude. Rianne placed a hand on his shoulder, proud of him for standing firm. But the judge was not done. He continued reading the final order. He declared that the mansion built on Aaron's land was constructed without legal permission. Therefore, full rights over the mansion now belonged to Aaron as well, since it stood on his property. The words hit the room like a sudden wave. Aaron had not only reclaimed the land, he had reclaimed the entire mansion. The HOA president sat frozen, unable to speak. Aaron had won far more than he ever expected. When the judge finished announcing the decision, the courtroom remained silent for a long moment. It was the kind of silence that carried shock, disbelief, and amazement all at once. Then whispering began to spread across the room as people tried to understand what had just happened. The young man who returned quietly to his hometown had won a case against one of the most powerful figures in the community. And he did not only win the land, he had gained the mansion that stood on it. Aaron sat still, trying to absorb the judge's words. His hands trembled lightly, and his breath felt unsteady. Lawyer Rianne placed a calm hand on his back and told him softly that this was justice. Aaron nodded but still could not fully believe it. The mansion that once looked unreachable had now become his responsibility. Across the room, the HOA president stood up slowly. His face was stiff, his jaw tight, and his eyes full of anger he tried to hide. For years he had used his influence to gain control of the things he wanted. He never imagined that someone would challenge him successfully. He gave Aaron a long, cold stare before leaving the room with quick steps. His lawyer followed behind him, whispering in frustration as the president walked out. Several townspeople looked away nervously. Others looked toward Aaron with quiet admiration. Some even came to him and congratulated him with gentle smiles. Myra approached him next, her voice warm and proud. She said that he had done something brave and honest. The elderly man who testified thanked him for reminding the town that truth still mattered. After leaving the courthouse, Aaron walked outside and took a deep breath of the cool afternoon air. The sky seemed brighter than before, and the streets felt lighter. For the first time since discovering the mansion, he felt free from the weight of helplessness. He had faced a giant and stood firm. He had believed in himself when no one else did. Rion walked beside him and said that they still had a few steps left. The legal victory was clear, but Aaron needed to take official possession of the mansion. They would have to inform the town office so the records could be updated. Aaron agreed. He felt ready for whatever came next. That afternoon they went together to the town office. The officer who had first shown Aaron the land record looked surprised when he heard the court's decision. He congratulated Aaron warmly and began preparing the new documents. He updated the land record and entered the mansion into Aaron's ownership file. When Aaron held the final paper in his hand, he felt a deep sense of completion. Everything was official. Everything was real. That evening Aaron went home and sat in his small rented room. It felt strange to sit there knowing he now owned one of the biggest homes in the entire town. The quiet walls around him felt almost too small for the reality he had just stepped into. He stared at the papers in front of him, the thick file that proved everything he had fought for. He did not sleep much that night. His mind kept replaying the judge's words. He kept seeing the mansion in his thoughts. He imagined walking through those tall doors and stepping onto the shining floors. He imagined standing on the balcony that overlooked the hills. He imagined exploring each room that had once been the pride of the president. It still felt far away, almost like a dream. The next morning he decided to visit the mansion again. This time he did not have to hide outside the gate. He walked up the long driveway with steady steps. The guard at the booth looked shocked to see him. Aaron showed him the legal papers. The guard read them twice, swallowed, then stepped aside respectfully. He opened the gate for Aaron without a single word. For the first time, Aaron walked through the gate as the rightful owner. He moved slowly, taking in the wide lawn, the stone paths and the tall pillars at the entrance. The mansion looked even larger up close. The sunlight reflected off the windows, and the building seemed to glow with a quiet strength. Aaron stood in front of the door, feeling the weight of everything he had been through. He opened the door and stepped inside. The interior was grand. The main hall had a high ceiling with wide chandeliers hanging above. The floor was made of polished tiles that shone like water. A wide staircase curled upward to the second floor. Large paintings hung on the walls. The air smelled of fresh polish and quiet luxury. Aaron walked through the rooms slowly. Every room was clean and carefully decorated. There was a living room with soft cushions and tall curtains, a dining room with a long wooden table, a kitchen with modern equipment. He walked from room to room, touching the smooth surfaces and running his hand over elegant furniture. Everything felt unreal, almost too grand for someone who lived in a small rented space. When he reached the balcony on the second floor, he stepped outside and looked at the land stretching across the valley. The wind brushed against his face, carrying the scent of trees and distant water. For a long time, Aaron stood there in silence and understood why this fight mattered. This land was the last gift from his parents. They had worked hard to secure it, and even though he had forgotten it for a long time, fate had brought him back to reclaim it. As Aaron explored more of the house, he discovered a room that looked like a private study. It had large windows, dark wooden shelves, and a wide desk. Papers were scattered across the desk, and Aaron felt curious. He walked closer and saw documents labeled community plans and construction approvals, but as he scanned them, he noticed something strange. There were no approvals for the mansion. There were no signatures from the town office. There were only blank spaces where important details should have been. Aaron felt a chill move across his shoulders. This confirmed what Myra and others had said. The mansion had been built without any legal permission. The president must have used his influence to silence questions and avoid inspections. Aaron realized the president must have depended on fear more than law. Aaron closed the files and stepped away. He understood that this discovery explained the president's anger. The court case did not only threaten his pride but also risked revealing his shortcuts. The president had hoped Aaron would back down. He had not expected someone to stand against him. Suddenly, Aaron heard footsteps from outside. He walked to the window and saw a few people gathered near the gate. When he went downstairs and stepped outside, he found that several neighbors had come to see him. They looked curious but polite. One of them, a middle-aged man, introduced himself as Jarrell and said that the community wanted to know what would happen now that Aaron owned everything. Aaron spoke calmly. He said he did not plan to punish anyone or make life harder for the community. He only wanted to protect his land and live peacefully. Jarrell sighed with relief and thanked him. A few others smiled and welcomed him to the neighborhood. For years they had lived under strict rules created by the president. Now they seemed hopeful for a fresh start. As evening approached, Aaron locked the mansion and walked back to town. He did not want to move in immediately. The mansion felt too large and too new. He needed time to think about his next steps. He needed time to understand the responsibility he now carried. But deep inside, he also felt something else, a quiet worry, a sense that the HOA president, a man who had lost so much in one day, would not let go so easily. Aaron walked through the fading light. knowing that the story was not finished yet. The next challenge was already waiting for him. The morning after the victory felt different for Rion. The air outside his small house felt lighter, as if the land itself understood that justice had returned. He stepped out onto his porch and looked across the wide fields that the court had declared his. The sun spread a soft golden light over the grass, and for the first time in a long time, he felt pride instead of worry. This land was his, and everyone now knew the truth. Myra arrived early that day. She walked across the yard with a bright smile and held out a folder. Rian greeted her with a simple nod, still adjusting to the idea that the long fight was finally over. Myra opened the folder and showed him documents signed by the judge in the county office. They confirmed everything. The entire area, including the huge mansion built by Malin, belonged to Rian. Nothing was left for debate. Nothing was pending. It was official. Rian took the papers carefully and read each line. Even though Myra had already explained it all the previous night, he wanted to see it with his own eyes. As he read, he felt something in his chest, something warm and calm, something he had not felt in years. Myra noticed the change on his face and gave him a gentle smile. She said he had earned this peace through patience and honesty. Rian thanked her and invited her inside for tea so they could talk about the next steps. Inside the house, they sat by the window. Myra explained that Malin had already begun moving people out of the mansion. According to the law, he had to clear the place immediately. If he refused, officials would handle it for him. Rian listened quietly. He was relieved but also thoughtful. He did not want trouble. He did not want revenge. He only wanted what was right. Myra assured him that the court had made everything clear. Malin had no room to argue. His power in the community would not protect him anymore. Later that afternoon, Rian and Myra drove toward the mansion for the first time since the court announcement. The building looked the same as always, tall and wide with polished stone walls and long glass windows. But today, something was different. Workers were carrying furniture out. Trucks were lined up on the driveway. People who once ignored Rian now stepped aside when he walked by. They looked uncomfortable, as if they knew they had been wrong but did not know how to admit it. Rian walked through the open gates slowly. He had always been kept away from this place by rules and threats. Now he entered as the rightful owner. Myra stayed close to him, ready to guide him through the legal details. The mansion felt almost unreal to Rian. He had lived in a simple wooden house all his life. This place had shining floors and grand staircases. There was a garden shaped like a maze, a fountain with carved stone birds, and a balcony that looked over the valley. It was impressive, but it also showed how boldly Malin had taken over something that was never his. A group of HOA members stood in one corner of the yard. Their faces were tense. Some looked guilty, some looked uncertain. Rian approached them with calm steps. One of them cleared his throat and said they never knew the land was his. Another apologized for following Malin without checking the truth. Rian listened without anger. He only said that he hoped everyone would learn from this. The truth mattered. Taking something that was not yours harmed everyone in the end. His words surprised them. They expected him to be angry, but instead he chose peace. After walking through the entire mansion, Rian returned to the front yard. Myra handed him a new set of keys that had been prepared that morning. She said the property was fully his from this moment forward. Rian held the keys and looked at the mansion. He could move in if he wanted, but something inside him felt unsure. Yes, the mansion was grand, but it also carried years of conflict. His heart still felt connected to his small home, the one he had built with his father long ago. Myra understood his silence without asking too many questions. They drove back to his land. As they reached his house, Rian stepped out and took a deep breath. He looked across the fields, trying to imagine the future. He wanted to make the land useful again. He wanted to grow crops, plant trees, maybe build a workshop or a barn. He did not need a mansion to live a good life. Myra told him that he could keep the mansion as an investment or transform it into something helpful for the community. Rian liked that idea. Maybe it could become a community center or a rental property to support local families. He would decide later, once everything settled. In the evening, neighbors gathered near his yard. They brought warm food and congratulated him. Some apologized for not believing him before. Rian accepted their words with his usual calm nature. He was not a person who held grudges. He wanted the community to move forward together. Myra joined them and explained how the land records were corrected and how the court's decision would prevent similar problems in the future. People thanked her too, as she had played a major role in uncovering the truth. The gathering lasted until sunset. Rian looked around and felt something he had missed for many years. He felt part of the community again. His name was now associated with honesty and resilience instead of conflict. People respected him for fighting his case with patience rather than anger. He felt proud of how he handled everything. When the sky turned dark, Rian walked to the edge of his land. He felt the soil under his boots and listened to the sound of the night wind. This land carried stories from his past and hopes for his future. The long battle was over. The fear of losing everything was gone. He closed his eyes and let the calmness settle into his heart. Myra walked over and stood beside him. She told him that he had shown great strength in the face of unfair treatment. She admired how he never lost focus. Rian thanked her for standing beside him when most others did not. They shared a quiet moment, watching the moon rise above the fields. Before Myra left, she handed Rian one last document. It was a full map of the land with every boundary marked clearly. She said he should keep it safe. Rian folded it carefully and placed it in his coat. This simple map held the story of everything he had fought for. After Myra drove away, Rian went inside his house. He lit a small lamp and placed the land documents on his table. He sat quietly for a long time. His journey had been difficult, but he had reached the end with dignity. Now, he could finally plan a peaceful future. Rian leaned back in his chair and smiled. The land was his, the truth was his, and his future belonged to him, untouched by false claims or unfair power. He felt ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The story of the mansion was complete, but his new life was just beginning.